How's it going, you guys? So in this video, I'm going to be discussing vitamin D deficiency and some of the caveats associated with vitamin D supplementation and vitamin D metabolism. So first of all, vitamin D is more accurately described as a hormone, and it is synthesized from a reaction between the sun touching the skin, the sun and its reaction to the skin, and then a reaction with cholesterol, which produces vitamin D, and then from there an entire hormonal cascade ensues. So everything from mineral metabolism, including calcium absorption and calcium metabolism, to testosterone and estrogen and the balance between those two hormones, as well as aldosterone, which is a hormone that regulates water balance, fluid retention, which obviously interrelates with mineral balance as well, and neurological processes of all kinds, including serotonin, including melatonin, obviously, that's part of the serotonin pathway. And so this is going to affect everything from your sleep to your anxiety levels and your relaxation. So your sleep, your mood, your cognition. You know, there's been many studies done that show vitamin D deficiency can cause insomnia. Vitamin D deficiency can cause all sorts of fatigue and adrenal symptoms. Obviously, vitamin D deficiency puts you at greater risk of developing osteoporosis because of its effects on calcium. And obviously, there's also something called a seasonal affective disorder, which is theorized to be caused by the sun. Okay, well, first of all, seasonal affective disorder is basically depression during the months when there's no sunlight out. And so some people get depressed during the winter time, and then it goes away during the summer. And the theory behind this, because it's obviously not proven, just as everything else in nutritional science can't be proven, despite what a lot of people will try to tell you, it's not a matter of proof, it's a matter of evidence backing theories. Essentially, the sunlight during the winter times goes down, and the sunlight has been mechanistically proven to influence your vitamin D and your serotonin. And so through way of sunlight deficiency, vitamin D deficiency, this can affect your depression and your mood during the winter months. And so it's less vitamin D from the sunlight during the winter months causing depression is a theory. And then during the summertime, more sunlight equals more vitamin D equals better serotonin melatonin balance, which will boost your mood. And that's the theory. So depression, bone issues, all sorts of pain disorders, a lot of autoimmune disorders, including psoriasis is another one. And the list goes on. If you have erectile dysfunction, if you have low energy, if you have unexplainable cognition problems, if you have insomnia, especially if you have insomnia or you have any of these problems and you've been diagnosed with vitamin D deficiency, seriously, getting your vitamin D levels on point is extremely important. It can be causing all sorts of problems, okay? In fact, what's interesting is there's studies that show societies that consume the most milk and dairy products have the most bone fractures. And what's interesting is that these countries just happen to be like the Arctic European, like the great northern European regions, which happen to be very cold, and they have very low sunlight year-round, if any at all. And so you could say that these greater risk of bone fractures in these northern European regions that drink a lot of milk, is it the milk or is it the fact that they don't get sunlight, vitamin D deficiency? You could say, oh, well, there's vitamin D in milk, but you see the daily optimal intake of vitamin D is a minimum of 2,000 IUs per day. And from milk consumption, I guarantee you those countries aren't even getting 800 IUs a day. So you got to be careful about correlation. This is the reason why epidemiology is unreliable for proving causation. This is why there's so much criticism against the veganism movement and epidemiology in general, is that people use it to prove their point, where it's really just the beginning of finding answers. It raises more questions than it does answering any. So, point is, vitamin D is extremely important for bone health. And so from there, we have to ask, well, how do we get adequate levels of vitamin D? Well, first of all, there's a lot of argument about this, but from my perspective, I highly recommend eating enough saturated fat and cholesterol. I know the vegan propaganda, they're going to tell you, these vegans, I can hear them right now, like, oh, like this guy and his cholesterol, there's no evidence, blah, shut the fuck up. As far as I can tell, cholesterol and saturated fat is only going to help you get adequate levels of serum vitamin D. There's some people that seem to have genetic adaptations or unique genetic modifications, unique genes that seem to influence their body's metabolism of vitamin D. And so some people may be able to synthesize vitamin D or absorb it or metabolize vitamin D from supplements, from the sun, etc., from foods, without adequate levels of dietary cholesterol and saturated fat. This may have to do with genetic unique genes relating to lipids, such as your cholesterol levels and whatnot. This could have many causes, but there seems to be a number of case studies of people who develop vitamin D deficiencies on diets that are low or devoid completely of saturated fat and cholesterol. And so while I'm not going to say this is a definite, without a doubt, but all I'm saying is to be on the safe side. If you're worried about your vitamin D levels, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't eat foods that are naturally high in dietary cholesterol and saturated fat. And the bigger thing here, and this is another thing, is that typically foods that naturally contain vitamin D, the active form, vitamin D3, not mushrooms, will have D2 supposedly. Typically, these foods are high in vitamin D3. If you notice, they're also highest in cholesterol, and not necessarily saturated fat. But foods like salmon, they're very high in cholesterol, but they're not high in saturated fat. They're higher in polyunsaturated omega-3s and various other fatty acids. Salmon is high in cholesterol and high in vitamin D3. It's one of the very rare sources in the food of vitamin D3. Eggs, they provide anywhere from 5 to 50 IUs of D3 per day. They also happen to contain 180 milligrams of cholesterol per egg, and I think somewhere like 2 grams of saturated fat. It's like one gram of saturated fat per egg, per large egg. What else? Milk, preferably raw milk, obviously. Raw milk happens to have high amounts of cholesterol, high amounts of saturated fat, also pretty equal amounts of monounsaturated. About 30% of the milk fat is monounsaturated. Not a lot of people know that. Same type of fats that are found in olive oil, although there are different types of monounsaturated fats. Very important that you differ the different types of saturated and monounsaturated fats. Anyway, also high in vitamin D3 and cholesterol. So it seems to come together in a package. And what I've kind of found is it seems like, first of all, HDL and LDL cholesterol levels that we measure in the blood they're not actually cholesterol, but they're lipoproteins. And what they are essentially is boats that carry nutrients. They carry passengers throughout the bloodstream. You can think of the bloodstream as a river, and think of HDL and LDL as boats. LDL goes one way and HDL goes another. Supposedly, the theory goes LDL carries nutrients such as fat and cholesterol to the cells, whereas HDL carries the nutrients out of the cells. And so essentially, what I'm thinking is in these foods, the reason why vitamin D and cholesterol are in the same package is because the cholesterol synthesizes the boarding of the boats of vitamin D3 and these other fat-soluble nutrients. So essentially, with the dietary cholesterol that's found in the egg, the vitamin D3, vitamin A, vitamin E, and all these other valuable fat-soluble nutrients, choline, they somehow like board the cholesterol on their way to the bloodstream and LDL and HDL to carry them into the cell. Now, I know that's a very large stretch of philosophy, and it's not necessarily the most grounded in science, although I will have to make a video that referencing studies on the screen with this HDL LDO boat boarding theory, right? So you guys can understand it's not an entire load of bullshit. It's not this electrical vegan diet type science nonsense, which there's no science at all to support that. So all I'm saying is there's probably a reason why vitamin D3 is packaged in cholesterol with these foods, and there's probably the same reason that a lot of people seem to develop vitamin D3 deficiencies. Some people, like on a vegan diet, they supplement with D3, and because their diet is so low, and well, for one, just fatty acids in general, let's be fair. Usually it's raw vegans, so let's be fair here. They're usually not eating a balanced diet, a balanced vegan diet even. But they're not eating enough fat, even vegan sources, let alone cholesterol. And they, despite supplementing with D3, their fucking levels of D3 are, their serum does not reflect D3 deficiency correction. So long story short, you should probably eat more cholesterol and more saturated fat. And if you're scared about saturated fat causing diseases, you should probably read the Big Fat Surprise by Nina Schultz. Read the Diabetes Code by Jason Fung. And a little bonus, one of my favorite books I just got done reading in one entire day is The Art and Science of Low Carb Performance by, I think his name is Jeff Volek, Dr. Jeff Volek, PhD, registered dietitian. Anyway, and Joseph Finney is the other doctor that wrote that book. Anyway, there's a lot of things to talk about with K2, with calcium, magnesium. I do have videos on those topics. You can look them up. Just search Chalice of Immortality and then D3 or K2 and it'll come up. But those videos were done in like 2016 and that was a long time ago, and my understanding of mineral absorption in relation to vitamin D, it has evolved, and I'm way more educated on the subject now than I was back then. But you can go ahead and check that video out for now because this video has already gotten way too long. So I hope that that's covered the majority of you guys' questions. There's so much more for me to talk about on this subject, but I just want to get this out there. Not to mention I just got Wi-Fi, so I kind of want to test the uploading speed and whatnot. So yeah, post your questions in the comments down below. Let me know if maybe I missed something, because I probably did. I'm not using an outline. This is all off the top of my head. And I'll talk to you all in the next fucking video.